Hey everybody, Red Mage here. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be doing something very different. I put together what I consider to be the ultimate OSR campaign region. This is a whole bunch of different supplements and different adventures and different campaign settings packed together into one map. And I decided to, I don't know, make a video on it and just show you guys what I put there, why I put them together. And then I'm going to put a link below to a Dropbox where you guys can get the Worldographer files, the different stages of completion, and the JPEG images if you want to use this for yourself. I don't know, just for fun. So here is what I have. I'm going to start with the front, and I'm going to do the adventure on the left, or excuse me, the adventure on the right and the region on the left. Now, quick note, there's going to be some spoilers here for hidden locations in the world, dungeons and things that aren't immediately apparent to players. So if you're going to be playing in a campaign in the OSR and you don't want, like for example, Dolmenwood, you don't want to know all the different locations, maybe look away. maybe don't watch this video. But if you are a GM, and a permanent GM like I am pretty much, then keep watching. So the first one is Dolmenwood. Right, and I have Dolmenwood here in I think a pretty good form. It looks pretty good. It's the right shape. It's the right size. I used some relatively close terrain types for each of the different kinds, and then I have all the different locations. So the settlements and places that are not necessarily ruins or dungeons or adventure sites. I mean, adventure sites are sort of a generic title, right? Because you can have adventure sites in town and all that too. But just ruins and dungeons, obvious dungeons, are sort of set off as in red, and then the other ones, every other location is set in black. And that's what I did for this. Now again, if you compare it to, I'm going to go over here, the map of Dolmenwood, you'll see it's actually quite good. I mean, again, spot on. In terms of the hexes. Each of these are 6 mile hexes, and that's one thing I wanted to comment on right away, is that because the maps are that hexes of Dolmenwood, I started with Dolmenwood, and so because Dolmenwood hexes are 6 mile hexes, the whole region map are 6 mile hexes. And what that means is that sometimes in the supplement, I did my best to match them up. And so sometimes in supplements, you know, things will be like a 1 mile hex, or they'll be like on a 3 mile hex or a 5 mile hex, or sometimes they won't even have hexes, and it'll say inches or something like that on the map. I did my best to make it work, and sometimes it didn't come out quite right, but it's close enough, and that's why I have the Worldographer file, so if something bothers you, you can always go into Worldographer and switch around some of the hexes, you know, if they bother you there. Now, the text I added in Paint. I added it after the fact. It's not from Worldographer. You could do it in Worldographer, but that just means if you want to change the map and then have all the text, you're going to have to change the map and then add it all back in yourself. But I have it all here, so you at least can just copy and kind of, you know, one eye on this map and the other eye on the text. But you can see, I mean, I think I did a pretty good job for the most part. Oops, I forgot. The nice thing about the Dolmenwood book is that it is completely hyperlinked, but that's also a challenge because I clicked and I randomly clicked and suddenly I'm at the back of it, but because every hex is hyperlinked there. But you can see, I mean, again, I think I did a good job of matching it up, at least well enough that you can kind of use this as the basis of a campaign map, which is all you really need, right? Doesn't need to be too detailed. Okay, so that's the first one, is Dolmenwood. And I think it's probably the most important one, because it's the one I built first, and it's the one everything else is kind of built around, and I tried to take the adventures that I thought are the campaign settings or the ideas that fit with a Dolmenwood game and put them into the surrounding regions. But there's some that obviously are start to stretch. And especially as you get further away from Dolmenwood, the tone is going to shift. Now, not everything is low level. Some of these are actually going to be pretty high level. But anyway, the next one that I wanted to include was the house under the moon dial. And so, oops, that's the other one, blank one. There we go. I did. Over here. So you can see here, and you're also going to see that I have a couple other as well. But Ramage is the main location here, and you can look at the surrounding regions and it looks pretty close. Now these are 3 mile hexes, so again, it's not going to be quite right. But if you look at the map of the area right here, see if I can get to it, here you go, you'll see that it's pretty close. It's pretty close. Now there is one change. and that's the city of Hapre, which is Hapre? I don't know how to say it. I changed to Ironguard Mott, and that's because I wanted to include Barrowmaze. And I know Barrowmaze has a hex in Dolmenwood that would work for it, but I wanted to include it. I actually don't think the tone is quite perfect, and I wanted to give it its own space on the map. So Barrowmaze is over here to the west. You got Helix, you have Bogtown, you have the Secret Shrine of Zorgon, Ironguard Mott itself, and Barrowmaze. Now, if you go back to the house on the moon dial, this shouldn't be a problem because Hapre, how do you say that city's name? It's never detailed in the book. It's never, there's no information given for it. So you could easily just shift it to Ironguard Mott, and nothing would change in the house under the moon dial. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to change it into Ironguard Mott is because not only did I want to connect some of these locations, but I wanted to build a sort of overall structure to the world, and having centers of power akin to like High Hankel or Brackenwold Keep, where you have people in charge of the surrounding regions, right, feudal lords. I wanted to keep that feeling for all of these different locations, and so Ironguard Mott is where the lord of the land is operating out of, and that means he's going to be the lord of the areas to the north of him too, which is also Ramage and Wyvernsford and Waldham and Dreadfalls and St. Larme or Larme, I don't know how you say that. So that means that there's going to be, and this one also, Nekemte over here. So that's kind of the idea here, is that you have a whole bunch of locations that are all going to be now under one official lord. And so the Lord of Ironguard Mott, as detailed in Barrowmaze, you can just now have him be the Lord of Ramage and all these other locations too. And so there's connections there. And so when the wolves of God are running wild in Ramage, I mean, down in Ironguard Mott, there are people who would probably care. And so again, you have more, it expands it a bit, and you can start to see connections. Now you don't have to, right? You could easily just run House under the Moon Dial and have it be north of Ironguard Mott and just bring that in. The nice thing about this is that no work is required, right? You can take any one of these products and just run it. And you don't have to have any of the others. You don't have to include them. But if you want to, then you can. And now you can say, if someone says, hey, where's the local lord? You can say, oh, he's south in Ironguard Mott. Right, then you're all set. You have the next location already built. Hey, we should go talk to him. All right, great. Let me grab my Barrowmaze and flip through the page to get to Ironguard Mott, see who's in charge, and boom, there you go. So I think that's really cool. Now, switching over to Barrowmaze for a second, I have the 5e version, but you can ignore that. Barrowmaze, the map here is one that required some major shifting because it's not quite right? But I think there's actually some the things that are right about it are still right here. Now the distance is quite big. Each of these hexes is 5 miles. You're dealing with a very large region. So from Ironguard Mott, for example, to the Secret Shrine of Zorgon, that's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 miles. Here it's only, what, 6, 12, maybe 13, 14 miles. So you're probably not going to be doing as much of a hex crawl on this as you would for the Duchy of Eric. On the other hand, you can just expand it. Say this road is longer, right? You don't have these, maybe there's, maybe this gap of hexes is actually like 30 hexes. And there's actually a big distance between Ironguard Mott and everything that's coming south of it, which you're going to see in a second here. You can already see some of it. So anyway, I wanted to include those things, and I think they work. I think they're pretty cool. But again, I've put all these together not because anyone in their right mind is going to run all of these, but so that if you want to, you could take this map, take the adventures that you have and play them. And then the players can hear rumors about one and the other and travel between them and go around. And you could just have a bit more of a fleshed out region, a bit more of a world, a bit more of a kingdom than simply one little area around the town and its surrounding villages. Again, we have tons of these products already, right? Why not put them together, right? Why isolate them and separate them out into different games and run a new game? And you don't even have to run a continuous campaign with this map, right? That's the idea. You could run a Dolmenwood game, and then you could run, hey, I want to run a couple sessions in Barrowmaze. You could put it in the same world. And now in relation of if the players do something crazy in Barrowmaze, well, then maybe they hear about it, their characters hear about it back in Dolmenwood, because it's actually pretty close. It's only like, 50 miles away, 80 miles away maybe. Okay, man, probably more like 80 or more, but something like that. Okay, so then Barrowmaze is next. Now, in the middle of this, you'll see I have the Barrow of the Bone Blackards. That's a dungeon that comes from the Adventure Anthology. It's the first of the adventures from the second anthology, Old School Essentials, Barrow of the Bone Blackards. It's a really good adventure, and it's tonally perfect for Dolmenwood, which is why I wanted to put it relatively close to Dolmenwood. The same thing with the House Under the Moon Dial. I think up here, this region is going to be a great tonal fit. And what's nice is that as you start to get west of Dolmenwood, out to Maidenhead Priory, Colstoke Keep, there's not a lot going on. And there's some, there's hexes and things happening in each of the hexes out here. But it's not like really, really detailed. And so having kind of an open space, there's this open field, it kind of still keeps that sense of being like the corner, kind of like, backwater. It's miles before you get to anywhere significant. But it also gives you something out that direction. So players are like, what is out that way? Like, oh, it's the Duchy of Ironguard, right? Or whatever it is. It's the County of Ironguard, right? Maybe Ironguard Mott. The guy who rules it is a count. And so you say, okay, well, maybe it's the County of Ironguard. Okay, or the Duchy of Eric, right? That's actually what it's called. It's the Duchy of Eric. You go, oh, okay, great. What's out there? Well, there's some towns. There's a big, there's a big marsh, and out in that marsh, there's this famous ruin. Some adventurers have gone out there and have not come back, and now you know what's out there. So instead of saying, what's west of Colstoke Keep? And you're like, who knows? Now you know. Okay, but anyway, Barrow of the Bone Blackards is a great adventure. I've reviewed it when I reviewed the adventure anthologies back in the day. Really good. So good. There's a bunch of skeletons that are going around, and they think they want to come back to life or get fleshed, and there's an angry fairy, and there's a necromancer who's being forced to fight, and there's giant spiders, horrible giant spiders. It's great. It's a really great adventure. Okay, great. So anyway, I like this one a lot. It's a great adventure. The next that I'm going to look at is also up here, and you can see at the very top, it's the Sorcerer's Sanctum. Now, this is something that I've reviewed before. This one's probably going to require a little bit of work, because the Sorcerer's Sanctum, as written, is like at the middle of a lake or like a sea, and there's like, you have to take a boat to get there, but just take the tower itself instead of this whole region. And it's, again, I think it's a tonal perfect fit for Dolmenwood. And it's really cool. Now, I guess I kind of made a mistake. I put it as a dungeon out here. It probably wouldn't be what you have to do, right? It's probably not a dungeon. It's probably more like it's an academy of wizards and different kinds of wizards. And I think that fits with Dolmenwood. I think it fits really well with Dolmenwood, especially out this way. Right, there's like nothing out here. There's Drigbolton and the Oath House. There's Fort Volger at the north end of the lake. But you don't have anything out here in the northwestern portion. You have a ruin of Smyrna, Smyrna. Smyrna. I'd prefer to say Smyrna. But you don't have anything out there. So putting the Sorcerer's Sanctum, I thought, made a lot of sense, as it's just kind of out there. But the Sorcerer's Sanctum is really cool, right? You put this thing, maybe it's on these rocks rising up out of a marshy part of the swamp. And, it's like its own thing. It's outside the bounds of the kingdom, which probably ends at the edge of Dolmenwood, right? And the Duchy of Eric only goes to the edge of the swamp, or maybe just to these hills here. And so it's beyond the borders. It's its own independent entity. And actually, I mean, who's going to try to enforce anything out there, right? It's out in the middle of the swamp, 20 miles in the middle of a bog, which is deadly and gross and nasty stuff going on. And plus, you're at the border of the kingdom. What they're doing out there, they can do what they're doing out there. But it also adds a little bit of interest to Drigbolton, right? Because these sorcerers probably do come into Drigbolton to get supplies, or their minions do. And now suddenly you have this interesting connection. I know Drigbolton has its own whole thing going on, but even that could be connected, right? The weird that befell Drigbolton, that's a connection. Maybe the thing that causes that is one of the sorcerers from the Sorcerer's Sanctum. Anyway, okay, jumping back to the west here, we can go down a little bit, and you're going to see that there's a couple that are all pushed together right in here. First is the Hole in the Oak and the Incandescent Grottoes. These two are both by Gavin Norman, obviously, and you have them right here. They're connected in world, or at least they can be. Now, what I think I did is I flipped them, because I think in-game, or in the books, I think Incandescent Grottoes is technically west of the Hole in the Oak. Although it's very vague. I mean, it wouldn't have to be. You could easily flip it. But if you didn't want to, you could just switch those two locations. But regardless, I think they fit right here because they're both kind of out of the way. There's not much going on in this portion of the world. There's a handful of other things right here. Ironguard Mott probably has some influence over them, but it's pretty far away, 6, 12, 18, like 30, 40 miles away, which again, in the Middle Ages, in an era of horse travel, not cars, is actually quite far. You're talking about a couple days on foot, and that's not going to be easy to do. So this is the limit of a lot of power projection, so there's going to be some wild stuff happening in here. Now, as you'll see, there's some more civilization down here, especially this is another unmarked. And I'll note that several of the towns on here are unmarked and unnamed. It's an unmarked larger city, center of some county or dukedom or something like that, duchy, right? Maybe this is a duchy here. And it will have some surrounding territories as well. So anyway, the Hole in the Oak and Incandescent Grottoes, I think they both fit with the tone, and they're great starting adventures. You could start an adventure in Blackapple or Alterstone, and I'll talk about those in a second here. But there's a lot of locations they could already go to, but then just add in these two as dungeons nearby. And like this right here, Blackapple, Alterstone, and their corresponding areas, which I'll talk about in a second, and these two dungeons, the Hole in the Oak and the Incandescent Grottoes, this is like a year or and a half of campaigning. Right, you could run a year and a half of a campaign from level 1 to like level 5 right in here. And I think you would have a great campaign. And you could hear about Dolmenwood, right? Dolmenwood's just a few miles east, but maybe they never have to go there. Maybe they spend all of their time in the Incandescent Grottoes and the Hole in the Oak before they even make their way back over to Colstoke Keep and then down to High Hankle or something like that. So you got plenty of adventuring to do right in here. But two of those, as I said, are the Blackapple Brugh, and that's where Blackapple and the Hen's Teeth Tavern come from. And then 3 Goblin Markets, which I've talked about before, which is one of my favorites. That's Alterstone here, which I realized has a bit of a road that goes down to the lake and then no road that connects it. I think that's actually kind of cool, but that's not exactly how... well, I mean, maybe it's river. Maybe it's river travel. Maybe they travel up through Bogtown. Maybe there's a really long river route from Bogtown down to Alterstone. Actually, you know what? You could even put Willow right in here somewhere. Willow is only accessible by river. That one. I didn't even think about that, but you could put Willow right in here. That would be great. Have Willow as a town in the middle of this forest, or maybe up here, and it's only accessible by river. It's kind of locked off from everything else. Actually, it would be perfect right in here. Yeah, you got. I missed that, but you should totally add Willow in right on this hex in between the Hole in the Oak and the Abandoned Manor. This is a big forest, right? You're talking 6 mile hexes. So that's a very large forest. So there's plenty of space to do your own thing and to adventure and add in more encounters and add in more locations. In fact, right, both the Blackapple Brugh, which is what this comes from, and the 3 Goblin Markets have a bit of a region, but they're both very nebulous. So here's the map of the wood. 3 Goblin Markets, just, flip it north-south. That's all you have to do there. And it's unclear how long these are. There are these sort of pathways that run along the treetops through this portion of the wood here. And I've marked where the Abandoned Manor is, but I haven't marked where the Lair of the Beast, the Immovable Monastery, or where the actual markets are. The Goblin Markets are out here somewhere. And that makes sense because you also have the Hen's Teeth Tavern, which is from the Blackapple Brugh, where you've got this elf and his brew and fairies and fey creatures, and they're doing some nastiness out here. And they're making people go insane. And so Blackapple Brugh is a perfect tonal fit for Dolmenwood. So it makes sense that it would just be a hop, skip, and a jump away from Dolmenwood. Because this is, granted, Dolmenwood is where the fairies are really active, but hey, this forest, you can name it whatever you want. All 3, the forest in Blackapple has a name, as does the forest in Alterstone, or 3 Goblin Markets has a name, and so does the but just pick one of them, whichever one you prefer, whichever one fits your world. And now it's the forest nearby Dolmenwood that also has fairies and a lot of fey activity. That's pretty cool, I think. And so this would work really, really well. It's a great adventure, and again, it's such a tonal fit that I would probably, if I had to, granted, you're going to see there's a lot of cool places to start a campaign. Obviously, Dolmenwood itself and all the adventures there, but I would be tempted to run something out here. Starting in Blackapple and having the Blackapple Brugh be the first kind of adventure with Incandescent Grottoes maybe as the nearby dungeon, and these are the two, and then they hear they ask calls for help down from Alterstone, and maybe somehow they hear about the Hole in the Oak, and they're all connected. Boom, you have a whole big thing. All right, now the next is the Black Wyrm of Brandonsford. Brandonsford is great. And it's also, all the places, all the names are generic. So you don't need to worry. It's the Goblin Castle, Dwarves Mine, Dragon's Lair, Barrow Mound. So you've got all that right there. And it's just it's a great fit. Now, the map is a little odd. It's very, very compact. This is each of these, an inch is a half mile. So you're talking about, just not very much, right? You're talking about maybe 6 miles, across this whole thing, so maybe this is 1 hex or something like that. So this is all spread out way more than Brandonsford actually is. Even so, I kind of packed them all close together, but this is a very small region. And you'll notice it's slightly, again, skewed. Now, one thing that's interesting is that Brandonsford is called a ford. That's why you'd name the town Ford, right? Brandonsford. So I wanted to give it a little ford. So I put the road continues on the west side of it, even though it doesn't actually do that on this map, and there's no road to speak of on this map. But anyway, yeah, that is why you would call a town Brandonsford. So that's why it's there. Anyway, that's why I put it there. Now, to the right of that, you can see something that is very different. That's the Sunless Citadel. That's Oakhurst and the Sunless Citadel from the 3rd edition adventure. The 3rd edition starter, it wasn't a starter adventure, but I think it was like one of the first adventures they released for 3rd edition, which I loved, the Sunless Citadel. So this is a near and dear to my heart. You obviously wouldn't have to include it if you're like, what? But actually, right, it's a crazy druid who had these fruits, and he's gotten goblins under his control, and they have fought with kobolds. And if you guys know, of course, the incandescent grottoes in Hole in the Oak, there are kobolds who have gone crazy, so maybe they could be connected, the same tribe. But you've got druids who've taken control of adventurers, and the goblins are fighting for him or helping him. And there is this fruit that if you plant creates the seeds of it create these little bramblelings, and that's all stuff you could easily add and just give it a Dolmenwood tone, right? Shift it over and make it a bit more fairy-y, fey-y. And maybe the guy here is furious at the people of High Hankel, and he wants to get revenge, and so he's creating these seeds. He's going to march an army across the plains and attack High Hankel, and now you have a big threat connection, right? I think Sunless Citadel actually makes a ton of sense. Now, one thing you'll notice is that if you look at the map of the Sunless Citadel, which I love this book, man. I'm so nostalgic for this art. Oh my goodness. So nostalgic. It's so good. But if you go all the way down to the art here of the overland map of Oakhurst, which these are great, you'll see that it is not quite the right direction. And there's this ravine, and you'd have to add that in. But you could just flip it once again, right? The old road doesn't go southwest of Oakhurst, it goes east of Oakhurst. And there's this broken old road that leads eventually to Notting Castle if you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 40 miles, something like that, right? Yeah, just about 40 some miles. So you're talking about a very long distance. Well, more than that, but you get the point. If you want to get to High Hankel, it's even more. So this is a good long trek across open plain, and there may be some farms and settlements out here, but not much. And so, oops, I keep on doing that. But come in here. Here we go. Okay, so anyway, I thought the Sunless Citadel was a funny fit, and then I started thinking about it, and I was like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. You put it right in there, Oakhurst and the Sunless Citadel. I think it actually is a great little starting adventure. And now the one thing here is, again, this blank town, blank city. You'd have to add in something. But I'm sure you could add in a city of your choice. And the nice thing is, if you don't want to, well, then there's no city here, right? Then the road just goes north of Oakhurst until it hits Blackapple. And there was a site of a city. Maybe there's like the foundations of a town, but then it got abandoned. And so you can pass through, and there's a cool bridge here that was built first. And then there's like maybe a tavern or something that is functioning, but the rest of the city was never built. Whatever you want. Maybe it was burned down. Maybe it was a disaster. Maybe it's a ruin. Maybe there's a dungeon here, right? You could add whatever you want right there. I didn't name it, but yeah, you can do what you want. Okay, if you go to the southeast, you will see the next entry, which is Summer's End. And I'll give you a sense of the whole map as a whole. Summer's End, of course, is one of Ben Milton's adventures, Questing Beast. It's just a one-page dungeon, and that's it, or a one-page hex. It's a 6-mile hex, Summer's End, and you've got the whole thing. And it's just got locations and factions and encounters. That's awesome. These have the Summer's End Mountain. It stands up, it's this peak that rises. These are smaller mountains, hills. They're not snow-capped. This Summer's End is always snow-capped, and so you can see it all around it. And if you look at the region, it's the highest thing for a long ways, right? Except for down here. And so you've got just a really, really, really far landmark. Again, you can see that from all around. It's a cool little thing to have, I think, out in the middle of this place. So you come out of the hills around Oakhurst, and you suddenly start to see Summer's End. And again, in relation to on your travels, if you're going around the region, you know where it is. So coming back over here really quickly, we've gone to Summer's End. Then there is Redtooth Ridge, and you can see that down here, Redtooth Ridge, which is built around, and I'll just come to this whole bit here. You see a couple more. This is kind of like the big city, right? And I'll talk about that in a second. But first, Redtooth Ridge. This is one of the advanced adventures. This is a standalone adventure. I just love the location. If you go to the map here of the location, it's this cool plateau, and it's got ruins. And what I liked about it is that it's like, from a long time ago, it used to be this like retreat for a bunch of rich people. And now, but it got ruined and centuries or a long time later, right? It's completely overrun, and it's completely, overgrown. And that's kind of cool. It means you want it relatively close by to a big city, because if it's a former pleasure palace, if it's a former place of, lots of rich manor houses and events and things like that, it's got to be pretty close to a big city, or relatively close. Right? And so that's what I thought. Well, that means I'll put it close to big city. So I like Redtooth Ridge here. It's got this road that goes around it. It's not actually close, it's not exactly close to any of the big cities, but it's close enough that you could certainly imagine it being like a retreat a long time ago, where you'd come north from this city here and stop by and then go back down. That'd be pretty cool. So I thought, but it's a cool adventure. It's just got a few different adventure sites. It's got some dungeons, the Ivory House, which is a cool name, the Mausoleum, and then some locations described elsewhere. And it's really, really minimal, but I like it. I think it's cool. Redtooth Ridge. So put that in your game. Advanced Adventures. The next is Wyvern Songs. This is the Peacock Point Lighthouse, which is from The Sinister Secret of Peacock Point, which is a dungeon crawl adventure for first level characters. Now this, if you wanted to start down here, obviously you could, but you're not really playing Dolmenwood, you're not really playing the rest. I just wanted to include this because it's more adventures on the same map. I think that's a cool idea. And you can see, again, in your world where Peacock Point is. So maybe players do this whole thing, and then maybe they have a quest to take them all the way back to Dolmenwood. So then you know the travel, and you can describe the way or the sites that they pass, or know relatively how far it is. Regardless, the nice thing is, because this map is all done for you, you can include it or not, right? If you want to start a campaign in the Sinister Secret of Peacock Point, boom, here you go. And then you're like, hey, I also want to include incandescent grottoes. Great, well now you know where the incandescent grottoes are relative to that. Now obviously you can make your own map, put them wherever you want, but if you don't want to make your own map and fit everything together, here you go, it's all done. This is a cool adventure, and again, it seems like a pretty good tonal fit for a Dolmenwood world. You've got some crazy goblins, you've got some a horrifying creature. You do have a bicycle, which again, there's stuff like that happening. Now, Fabian's Atelier, or Atelier, however you say that, is actually a really good dungeon too. It's a puzzle dungeon, but it's a flying island workshop, and you can just put that anywhere. I didn't put that anywhere because it's a flying island. You can put that wherever you want. So anyway, I think that's a great one. But the Sinister Secret of Peacock Point is a really good one. Now, the next two, the Rainy City and Endon, as you'll see down here, are not really an adventure. They're more like supplements. I'm using the Puppet Hand's Guide to Rainy City just by way of stand-in, but it's got a whole set of books, The Lesser Key of Sandiston. And it's just got a whole series about detailing this city called the Rainy City. And you could... I just like the idea that there's this like cursed city here that's just always raining. It's a cool idea. And put it in the world put it in the world of Dolmenwood. Maybe this is the capital. Maybe this is where the king resides. And that's why I said it's also Endon, which is from Magical Industrial Revolution by Scripples. Now, this is a pre-apocalyptic setting guide, and the stuff in this book is very clearly not exactly right for Dolmenwood. I mean, it's like it's bigger. It's dealing with a industrial revolution. You're dealing with a different level of technology and a different sort of assumed setting. But the city of Endon has obviously been around for a long time. So make this, if you want to put Dolmenwood in sort of the, late medieval, very early Renaissance, or wherever it is, maybe it's pure Dark Ages, maybe it's wherever you want to put, just put Endon in there, but put it at a different time in its history. And you can use some of these ideas from this book in developing Endon. I think it's cool. I just love that. So I thought make Endon the capital of this region, make the king down in Endon, and now you know who the king is, or at least you know where the king is. It's the king of Endon. Or the king's palace down in Endon. And NPCs can say that, right, in Dolmenwood. It's like, oh, what I wouldn't give to be at a ball down in Endon, whatever. I mean, instead of at this backwater. It just gives you that background to the world. And again, the nice thing is by just doing that, you don't have to do any more work. You just drop in Endon. But if the players are like, hey, what is Endon like? well, now you have a couple books that you can detail, and you can start to tell them stuff. And then if they're like, hey, we want to go there, well, now you have more resources to draw from. So that's what I mean when I was talking earlier about just, we have I should say this myself, I have so many supplements, and I have so many different books and adventures that have this world built out. Why not leverage those into one big world? And when there's a tonal discrepancy, I pick a direction and I go with it. And obviously my notes are going to develop my world in its own way. And so it's not going to be the same world as somebody else who has the same adventures and the same map. It's going to develop in a different line. That's true for Dolmenwood itself, and it's true for this bigger thing that I've randomly put together here. So anyway, Rainy City and Endon, I think those are great, and they would go really well there. Okay, now we're going to jump back to the top and jump to the right, because up here we have Castle Xyntillen, which is great. And I talked in my other video where I went through all the different supplements and books and monster manuals and things that would be good with Dolmenwood, which you should use for this world, by the way. But I talked about Xyntillen, and I said, you know, it's a really good fit in one sense. It's not so good a fit in another because it's not really fae or fairy. But man, as soon as I saw that the northern portions, the northeastern portions of Dolmenwood had sort of a French vibe, Chanton or Chancton, or however you say it, Chanton. I don't know how to say that, but it looks French to me. And then you have the Chateau Mauvaise, or Mauvaise, or however you say that too. As soon as I saw those two things, I was like, man, Tours en Savoie and the Castle Xyntillen, that sounds perfect then. Put it right up there. And here you have it, right? You add a little road off this northern bit here, and it goes to Tours en Savoie, which then continues on into the wherever you want it to go. This other kingdom up here, right? This is the border of a kingdom. Again, it's at the edge of Dolmenwood, not much in terms of political extension past there. And then you have these hills and mountains, and Castle Xyntillen stands at a bit of a, you know that Chamberlain is going to be somewhere north of here, because Chamberlain is the big city mentioned that Xyntillen technically falls within the domain of. So you know the next big city north of this is Chamberlain. Great. So now you know something about the neighboring kingdom to Dolmenwood to the northeast. And again, Xyntillen is a great location, and so if players are drawn to Tours en Savoie, then of course Xyntillen's going to be by. And you just make Mauvaise, make it the Chateau Malaval, right? And now you have a connection between Xyntillen and this place, because the Malavals might have an influence here. And Malaval, Malbleet, maybe there's some connection between those families, right? The Malbleet's down here in Lank, High Hankel. So anyway, I think this is a great fit in a lot of ways, and I liked where it went. I really, really liked it here. Right nearby, is the Chamberlain's chessboard, which is an adventure that I really love for Karen. And it's a great little eastern place. I don't know what's east of it. There's some mention of some things to the east here. But you've got a great little region to cap off at the eastern portion of Dolmenwood. And this would also be a great place to start, right? You start in Charstead Village. You hear about the city of Dolmenwood to the west. You do some stuff in here. You do the adventures here. And you get led west to Castle Brackenwold, and then you have your beginning of your Dolmenwood adventure. So you have a great little introductory adventure off to the east of Dolmenwood, and then you cross the road, cross the bridge, and you get to Castle Brackenwold, and now you have the Dolmenwood adventure to follow. So the Chamberlain's chessboard, I think, was a really good adventure to put right there. Again, it's very, very tonally specific, but there's a lot of great NPCs, a lot of great ideas here. The chess pieces are so brilliant, the way that they're used, the magic items there. Now you'll notice, again, this is for Cairn, and that Dolmenwood is for its own system now, and there's OSE adventures here, and there's some Shadow Dark adventures there, and then there's some, it's just kind of scattered in terms of, there's 5e with Barrowmaze, and there's 3rd edition with Sunless Citadel. So this is by no means going to be just like an easy, oh yeah, I'll just easily put that into my game of choice. No, you'd have to adapt it. But I figure that's maybe the least of your concerns. It's not that hard to adapt a game to a different system. At least I've never found it to be a challenge. I almost don't even pay attention these days to what system a game is for. The exception to that is 5th edition, because I do think that it has, it's just harder to convert. But even 5th edition is not too bad. I've run 5th edition adventures for Shadow Dark. I did Curse of Strahd for Shadow Dark, and that wasn't that hard ultimately actually to convert over. It did take some work, but it was fun work, right? It was fun. So if you're going to run one of these, you might have to do a little translation. But they're mostly OSR, which means they'll mostly translate pretty easily. All right, now south of it, you'll see this Tour Eridinel, and a nearby town which has no name. You also see over here Hindenburg, which is coming up in a minute too. But right here, this is another one of these examples where I don't have a town. I didn't have a name for it because the nearby town in the webs of past and present, which is where Tur Eredinel comes from, does not have a name. There's a nearby town implied. There's an adventuring company implied, or it's explicit that you're there, sent there. There's a patron that is requested, but there's no particular town. So you could easily have this, if you don't want, you could just have there be no town here and have Castle Brackenwald be the nearest big city and then Hindenburg be the nearest small town. And the players can go between them as they want to go to Eredinel. But I wanted to include this dungeon because it's a great dungeon. It is a really, really great dungeon. This is EMDT. This is number, obviously, EMDT 90. But it's a really great dungeon. It's cool. It's a forest dungeon, which is outside, which I love. It's got outside locations, which is great. And there's multiple ways inside it. It's just, I have a soft spot in my heart for any dungeon that isn't an enclosed space underground. I also like those. I like plenty of enclosed spaces underground. They're super fun. But any dungeon that is like a palace or a building that is above ground or a tower or open air. I mean, one of the things I really wish we did more of is like forest dungeons where the rooms, quote unquote, are like a glade or a particular spot in the forest, right? And it's a dangerous forest. You can't just camp out, right? So it's in that sense, it is a dungeon. But I wish we did that more. As dungeon masters, I wish we made more forest dungeons or, caved. Well, we do a lot of cave dungeons, but forest dungeons or plain dungeons, right? Or moor dungeons or swamp dungeons, basically. Anyway, this is kind of tangential. This is a cool adventure. I'm not going to do a review here of any of these, really. I just would recommend you guys check it out. And at some point, maybe I'll do a review of it. But I thought it was a great fit for this particular part of the world because this particular part of the world seems pretty... So Castle Brackenwald is like the biggest, where stuff is happening here. Most of the travel through Brackenwald is going to go southwest and then over river between the Woodcutter's encampment down to Drag and then down to High Hankle and then High Hankle down, obviously down that way. So Brackenwald, despite being kind of the biggest city around here, it's kind of isolated. It's kind of a backwater, right? It really is. I mean, I think High Hankle in this particular version is going to actually see more travel than Castle Brackenwald would. Now, again, if you could change that because maybe the capital is east, maybe past Charstead Village, maybe this is where all the travel goes between Castle Brackenwald and Charstead Village, in which case this is High Hankle is the odd man out and it's the harder place to access. You could choose. But again, if you just look at this map, it looks like High Hankle is much more of a centralized location. It looks like it connects with more, and so probably more trade would go through it. But that all being said, I thought this little corner of the forest between these two rivers, right, this one comes south, this one's going north. It's an interesting little nook. Charstead Village, you could walk down there to it. But it's pretty far, 20 miles or so, 25, 30 miles. And so it's a good hike if you want to go overland here and not follow the road. But if you follow the road, you go right past it, just within a few miles of it. So it's this old elven palace, close enough to Dolmenwood that it would have some connection to the elves and the fae, but ruined and long abandoned and not fae anymore. And that's one of the interesting things is that Hindenburg, which is what we're going to come to next, has some fae elements, especially the Thirsty Sprite, and there are some fairy elements here. There's the crones down here in the crone's cottage. But it's not a fae forest. It's a ghostly forest, right? It's a haunted forest. It's cursed. And so you don't have the same sort of fairy influence down here, it's very close to Dolmenwood, but also it's beyond Castle Brackenwald. And this area is like, firmly within the grasp of law and humans and things like that. And so it makes sense that this area maybe was conquered or captured or destroyed, or the fae influence was crushed a little bit, as this is much more within the domains of the men, of humans, right? So anyway, I think that's kind of cool. Hindenburg is such a great adventure. The Horrendous Hounds of Hindenburg. You could easily start a campaign down here too, right? Hindenburg, Charstead, and Brackenwald. This could be the main area that they're going through, doing all their adventures, and then once they finish up at the end of level 3 or whatever they get to, second level adventurers. So maybe start in Charstead, they go down to Hindenburg, and get to level 3 or 4, and then at the end of that, they go to Brackenwald. And now they're level 3 and 4, ready to tackle the ruined Abbey of St. Cloud, or something like that, right? So anyway, Hounds of Hindenburg, a great adventure here. As you can see, there's another one of these there's another one of these blanks, a castle or fortification or something like that, and it's way out there, right? You're looking at 6, 12, 18, 24, 30 miles from this other, which doesn't even have to be here. And if it's not there, then you're looking at kind of just out in the middle of nowhere. Miles from Brackenwald, no other settlements. Now, obviously, you can put little thorps and towns and hot hamlets and cottages and taverns and farmsteads all throughout this region, and it looks like it could be pretty fertile, so I don't see why you wouldn't. But there's no major settlements nearby for lots and lots of miles. This is the biggest place on the map, and it's unnamed. But it's isolated, so there's prime opportunity for you to plug in your own adventure. A keep, a ruined keep, haunted keep, some castle town with a secret. Hey, if you want, just add in the keep on the borderlands right here. Boom. And you can just add a little bit of a forest down here, and suddenly you have Caves of Chaos right over here. Boom. There you go. Caves of Chaos right here. Confirmed. All right, to the southwest, you can see, obviously, Willoughby Hall and Turnip Hill. Turnip Hill is the town in the Waking of Willoughby Hall, and Willoughby Hall is just the south of it. It doesn't ever say how far away from Turnip Hill Willoughby Hall is, and so it makes sense it's right there. I like this distance from Dolmenwood. So first of all, you got this big open plain. That's a good 30-mile plain, and so again, there's going to be farms and stuff, maybe small crossings and fords through here, but not anything very easy to travel. And there's no major bridge, no major crossing of this river except here. And then there's no major crossing of this river except here, and so it's actually quite hard to get from Turnip Hill to Dolmenwood, unless you can cross the river, swim across. So it doesn't have a lot of trade access across, which means it's going to be isolated, despite how relatively close it is. I like that a lot because Willoughby Hall Turnip Hill has this sense of being isolated, at least it seems to me. Maybe that's wrong, but that's how it feels to me. So I liked it right here. It was a good spot for it. Now to the south of that, we get the Breckenwald region, which is the Yellow Book of Breckenwald. And I really like this region here. You can see it's kind of the edge of the map. It's cool. Now there was some glitching here. Yeah, I forgot to remove something, so I had to add it in later, and it just kind of didn't click very well. But that's just because it was in the image by that point, the JPEG file. But it's not that big of a deal, hopefully. And in the Worldographer files, it's not there, obviously. But the Yellow Book of Breckenwald, if we go to the region here, it's not quite right. You can see that it's slightly off, and there's some places on here that obviously aren't marked. A lot of these places aren't marked, the little locations, and that's true obviously for all of the hexes of Dolmenwood and stuff like that. So not every adventure location or settlement is marked, but some of the major ones are. But like this could be a dungeon. It's not really a settlement actually. The Shrine of Asclepius, I put it as a town. It doesn't really look like a town, and if you read through the Breckenwald, it's not really a town, but it is kept up by people, as is the Chapel of the Holy. I think it's the Chapel of the Holy Cheese Board or something like that. But it's cut off there. And your grain is a very small town. I wanted to add in, so I made the Shrine of Saint Asclepius actually a town, and you could develop that a bit and make it more of a town. But the region as a whole is still pretty cool, and Breckenwald is the center of this. Now it's cool because if Breckenwald is very far from the Sorcerer's Sanctum, but both are like schools. And so there could be some sort of like professional rivalry between the Sorcerer's Sanctum and the Breckenwaldians. And it's like, Breckenwald is too, organized, and, you have to follow the rules, and they have all the students you have to teach. And no, the Sorcerer's Sanctum is just about experimentation and about, exploring magic. Real research is done there. The Wizards of Breckenwald, they don't know what they're talking about, right? You could easily imagine that sort of thing as like a rivalry. I think that's cool. Academic rivalry, right? There's the wild sorcerers up there at the Sanctum doing their own thing, and then there's we down at Breckenwald. We recognize the structure of magic, and we recognize that magic. Meanwhile, they're sitting on top of this super dangerous, dungeon and all this stuff. So anyway, cool. I like it. I thought it's really fun. If you go west, we have the Rock of Sham and the Shrine of Mulvis. Both of these are locations from first the Dance of the Leprechaun, which is a funny kind of adventure. I included it mostly on a whim. I just wanted some sort of adventure nearby to this blank town. These are two blank towns here, unnamed, and the town, as far as I could see in this adventure, is unnamed. I might be wrong about that, but I didn't see it as I was reading through it. So it might be the case that I just completely looked past the name of the town. In which case, just make it that town. But otherwise, you have here the sort of introduction, and there's the children of the village have begun to start trampling all of this guy's clover field, and then out here, this is where the rock is, and so it's fairly close to town. It's a little bit closer, I think, actually, in the adventure, but you have a little dungeon here, and it's pretty silly, but it would work. And I didn't want every location to just be a jam-packed adventure location, so having one thing that might or might not happen out here, that's pretty cool. The players stop by, there's a little tavern, there's this nearby Rock of Sham where there's a fairy guy, fae thing out there. You don't necessarily have to call him a leprechaun. And they have to offer him stuff, and one of the times the players are traveling by, things have started going wrong. So that's the only thing that has to happen here. And then this town also is also not marked, and that's because it relates to the Shrine of the Oozing Serpent, which is the Shrine of Mulvis. And again, it's the local duke, which would probably be down here at Stone Pit Crossing, but we'll talk more about that in a second here. The local duke has offered a reward for killing whoever has made the King's Road unsafe. So this King's Road is unsafe, and something has been attacking it out of this, and it's, of course, the Galoops Sootmerk, who is the Grease Dragon, which fits with the different kinds of worms, sort of, the bile worms that we get in Dolmenwood. Now, it says it's Kefrek Marsh, but I thought a moor would be more fun, so it's Kefrek Moor. You could make it that, right? If you have the Shrine of the Oozing Serpent. And so there's this high moorland, which is, got some dangerous locations, some bogs, sort of, right? But it's just also a lot of high land and stuff like that. Whenever I think of moor, I think of the Hound of the Baskervilles. Although that's not quite right. But anyway, the Shrine of the Oozing Serpent is a cool little dungeon. It's very small. But again, it's one of those things you just throw in. The players are down here. They get a rumor to follow north that there's this town, and travelers going north of it and south of it along the King's Road here are being wrecked. And so they have to go find out why. And they go up here, they get rumors. Obviously, they could also go to Summer's End. And there are rangers on Summer's End who might be able to help track down the creatures at the Shrine of Mulvis. But if they don't, go to the Shrine of Mulvis and deal with it. Okay, next on here you have Aberrant Reflections, which is here the Temple of the Fallen Star. Aberrant Reflections is a really cool adventure. And once again, there is a town implied, and it's a nearby town, but there's no name given. So I left it blank. You can give it the name you want, and you get a really cool dungeon, which I haven't reviewed on my channel, but you can look over at Questing Beast and see his review of it. It's really cool. This is a puzzle dungeon with a lot of really interesting plane or dimensional puzzles you have to kind of figure out. A local boy, Troilus Runk, was bitten after sneaking down a mysterious staircase in the middle of a dried-up lake. So here you go. Here's the dried-up lake, and then there's this staircase and leads down into this dungeon. There's the nearby town. The boy was out here playing miles from home. He and his friends were like 10 miles away. I don't know why they were. It's probably a little too far, but that's fine. Maybe he was hunting. And then he came back to town, and there was a temple, and he was not able to be cured, and so then rumors started to spread about it. And now now you're here, the players, the adventurers. So that's that. Stone Pit Crossing is this advanced adventure, standalone adventure. I picked it because it's a super cool location. It's a town built at the top of an old dwarven dam. That's so cool. And so it's a dungeon that goes down into the dam. And so you make this like the center here's the town up on top. And so there's a road that meets on this side of it and then comes off this side of it. And then you have, basically you just go down into the dungeon, which is the rest of the dam built into the cliffside. That's so cool. There's this spillway between, and then there's different levels on each side. I think that's really, really cool. So anyway, I picked it because of the location. It's kind of a weird dungeon to put, especially if it's like the capital, the regional capital, but you could have like a duke or a count or a baron or something who runs technically Stone Pit Crossing. And he's the baron of like all of this north stuff, and it's just wild, and there's like rangers, and it's kind of a frontier, and there isn't just a ton of stuff. There's some settlers maybe settling along the river, but it's still like being resettled or rediscovered or something like that. And so he has some influence up here. Okay, next is Tomb of the Twice Crowned King and Other Adventures by G. Hawkins, and that's what's down here. you have the whole area of Gunderholfen. And I have Gunderholfen on here. You have the Darkness at Nekemte. You have the Pestilence of Halith Vorn. Just a whole bunch of adventures. There's one more that I can't think of at the moment. Of course, Gunderholfen itself, Twice Crowned King, the Bottomless Pit of Zorth. Yeah, that's the one. That's right here. So you have all of these locations. You have a couple towns and Longfelt, which is, of course, the regional capital down here. And you have another unnamed village or town. Again, you could easily add it, or just there's no town there. It's up to you. And by the way, that's also true for the area around Endon. There's 3 unnamed towns and then an unnamed castle, which plenty of fodder for more adventures that way. And I was thinking, a lot of EMDT's stuff. There's one in particular that I really should have put in for here. It's a kind of ruined old estate where a pirate has set up sort of an inland headquarters. I think that would work really well right here, because this could make this like a piratey shore. Or up here, maybe this is like piratey. I don't know. You could. Anyway, back to Gunderholfen. Gunderholfen is super cool. It's a big mega dungeon. So you've got 3 mega dungeons by my count on this map. And a whole bunch of other low adventure locations and dungeons. So three mega dungeons should satisfy you. Obviously, you could add in Stonehell easily enough, right? That would be another pretty easy one, because Stonehell feels a little generic in terms of its setting. So you could easily put that in here too. And a handful of other great mega dungeons could fit into this world anywhere. Put them in. Remember, I'm including the Worldographer files, so you can obviously just edit this and change it around and add in more if you want. But here's the baseline for you. So yeah, Tomb of the Twice Crowned King. I love this. This is such a cool one. I want to run some down here. And again, you could just run, well, with Gunderholfen, just endless campaigns in this one region right here. And it's all laid out. And again, the swamp isn't quite the right shape, but it's close. And the surrounding area is not quite right, but it's close. Now, there's also a bit of hex double use here. This is sort of like the chasm. These dead hexes. I use them for the Thorn Forest elsewhere. I use them for just a couple things on the map. So the Thorn Forest up in Dolmenwood. So I use them for multiple things, but that's fine. It's in different corners of the map, and if you're not going to be running just based on this map. You're going to be using this as sort of like a master map, and then you're going to use the maps from each of the actual adventures that you're running as the detailed map, and that will tell you what all this stuff is. But even if you just want to use this map as inspiration and make up your own stuff about these locations, well, you can. I like how a couple of these places just says shrine and tomb. I kept stuff like that and put it on the map because I thought, well, hey, might as well. You can always name it yourself. Okay, east of that, we've got in the shadow, of Tower Silveraxe. And this is a great little frontier. And it looks really busy, and it is. But most of these are dungeons, and these settlements are very small or monsters. And so it makes sense this is out in the middle of nowhere. This is at the very edge of civilization. I'll give you guys a sense of where everything is. I'm just looking at each one in particular, but I'll kind of do an overview of the regions and what's related to what in a second here. We're coming up on an hour-long video, but still, I think it's fine. Shadow Tower Silveraxe is so cool. So cool. I love this. And there's so many cool dungeons here. You could start a campaign here and run this really, really easily. And the nice thing is you run a couple adventures here. You have a campaign here, and then the players can come just south to past Drunepool and go to Longfelt, and now they have another location. So if you want a hex crawl sandbox to run, and then you want another one back to back with the same, just developing, changing the tone a little bit. Shadow of Tower Silveraxe is more vanilla. This is a little bit more gonzo, a little bit more wacky, a little bit more gloopy and slimy and weird. So if you want that, you can go that way. If you want really off-the-cuff wild, you can go north to Breckwald. And if you want really creepy and dark, but also oozy, and also still in that sort of hex-crawly vein, go to the southeast. Because there you get the evils of Ilmire. Right in the corner, right at the border of civilization, you get the evils of Ilmire, which is a very gross, culty, swampy, nasty place. And it's just so far from everything else that it makes sense that the tone here is going to be different. I think it's cool, but it's weird, man, and it's creepy. And so it's at the very edge of the settled lands. And to get there, right, you got to go past Breckwald, which the wizards there have lots of protection spells and things cast in the surrounding region. So it's not like the evils of Ilmire are going to bubble up past them. And then you've got the whole Gem Throne wilderness here and all these forests and the surrounding area. And then you've got this whole swamp blocking it. So it's just like you've got a barrier from civilized land down here. So it feels right to have this sort of weird creepiness down here, all the way down. The Evils of Ilmair. I think I misspelled Ilmair here. Yeah, I just put one L. Oh well. Okay, so those are the adventures that I wanted to include, and as you guys can see, that's more than enough. I'm insane. I mean, you know, no one would ever run a campaign in all of these places. That's not why I'm making this. So like, hey, run a campaign such that you use all of these adventures. But rather, I wanted to nest all of these adventures in one world. And here is the world. Now that you've got a sense of the different parts of it, you can see how it all fits together. And I think it fits together really well. You've got Dolmenwood as the big centerpiece up here at the top, right? And I think it really is a good centerpiece. Not only in terms of just the adventures and sort of the focus, but also just in terms of actually setting the tone for settlement density and for roads and for the kind of style of campaign, the style of world you're building. I think by putting that centerpiece here, you can kind of build the periphery around it. And the periphery is each very different, right? In the northeast, you have Castle Xyntillen, which is a very different kind of campaign from the Evils of Ilmair, which is down here, which is very different from Gunderholfen, very different from, you know, a Rainy City or Endon campaign, or very different than Brandonsford and Incandescent Grottoes. And over to the west, you have a bit more generic, you know, like non-threatening D&D. And by non-threatening, I mean you're not dealing with really, really weird, gross things. You're dealing with pretty standard adventure stuff. That's not to say it's bad or boring. In fact, this is kind of my preference. Over here, I think if I were to play in this world, I think my preference would be in the northwest and west corner. I think it'd be Dolmenwood and everything up here, this whole section. But this is pretty cool too, and I really like how this is all like wild and kind of like frontier. Redtooth Ridge, Summer's End, Stonepix Crossing, and then these places, it's all open and empty, and it has this sort of sense of like traveling through densely populated areas. You get open plain, and you get mountains and forests that aren't going to be inhabited by a lot of people. And then you get along the coast, and you're going to have a lot more people, suddenly. You have a lot more people down here, and as it goes down into Longfelt, you've got actually some settlements in some places, and obviously you can add in more. And you could add in more too in the center if you want. You know, I think the distance from London to York is about 100 or 210 miles or something like that in England. And this, from High Hankel all the way down to like Longfeld, is like 150 miles. So it's really far. I mean, we're talking about a huge kingdom, right? If you were to actually put this in kingdom's terms, which is why one of the things that always bothers me about D&D is, I become very picky about realism in terms of spacing, in terms of kingdom density, in terms of how many people are living there, and I can't as a DM abstract from that. I get caught up on it. And if a DM presents a world to me that's like, hey, we're gonna have a town of 50,000 people in a wasteland with no farms, I'm like, yeah, no, you're not. They're all dead. Everyone's dead. Nope, that doesn't work. You can't, unless you have some way of explaining how you're feeding 50,000 people every day. No, there's no city here in the middle of nowhere with no farms nearby. Nope, that doesn't work. But you know, some DMs will do that. We're like, okay, we're gonna start you off in this town. It's a cool image. It's a cool idea, but you're like, no, it doesn't actually. It breaks realism to the point. So my worlds tend to maybe even overdo it on realism, and I think this sort of map gives a good healthy mix between, you know, breaking out the Domesday Book and how many, you know, glass blowers were there in England at the time of the Norman conquest. Okay, well, I have to make that percentage be precisely right in my world too, and which I haven't done that, but I've come close in other ways, which is kind of insane. But by the way, if you guys don't know, you should check out the Domesday Book website, where you can plug in size and terrain type, and it will generate how many settlements you should have based on the Domesday Book's calculations for that, if you want a world as dense as England was at the time of the Norman conquest. It's a really cool site. Maybe I'll put a link below just because it's so cool. But it gets me in trouble with this realism idea because I get so caught up in it that I lose the fantastic. Well, the nice thing is these products are all fantastic. And they're all fantastical. And there's tons of crazy, wild, and wacky stuff. So if you were to put a world like this, I think it would be a nice, and Dolmenwood gets this really well, a nice balance between realism, lived in, realistic, plausible, believable world, and fantasy, fairy tale, extraordinary, fun to play in, new, and not just reading through, you know, Winston Churchill's History of the English-speaking Peoples in the Middle Ages, right? Like it's not just history; it's also fantasy and all this stuff too. So I think this does a really good job of the adventures that I included. You know, again, patting myself on the back. I think the density in which I've placed them, the distance of what I've used, I think this is a good place. I don't know if you're going to hex crawl over this. No way. I don't think I would. But you could hex crawl in smaller parts of it and use it as just your background. And so again, like I keep saying this, but you don't. Obviously, you're not going to run all of these. But if you want to run, hey, you want to run the Leprechaun's Folly or whatever it was, I forget what it's called. Now I forget. Let me find it again. Dance of the Leprechaun. You want to run Dance of the Leprechaun? Great. Put it right here. Build your little town, give it a name, and now you know if that campaign takes off and players like it, well, maybe we'll go north to High Hankle. Or maybe we'll go west to Oakhurst, or maybe we'll go south to Stone Pit Crossing, or maybe we'll take a trek over to Summer's End and run that. And the idea is now you just have a place to play in. Okay, well, this is an hour-long video that could have been about 3 minutes, but I wanted to go through it. So anyway, I hope this has been interesting, guys. I'm going to put links below again to the Dropbox where you can get all of the files, the Worldographer files, and the JPEGs. I'm also going to include a list of all of the, and by the way, one of those Worldographer files and one of the JPEGs has the adventure name or the book that I got the adventure from pasted over the different parts of the map. So if you want to compare, you're like, oh, okay, so wait, which book was Ramage from? You just look at the other image and it'll say House Under the Moondial up here. And you go, okay, great, now I know where that is. But I'll also include a document with links to DTRPG, mostly DTRPG, pages for each of the adventures and books that I got. So you guys can find it all there. And I'll put them all in the notes below as well. All right, guys. Well, as I said, I hope this has been interesting, and I'll see you all in another video.